The overriding theme of the callers to our FIT TV programs is the daunting task litigants meet with a laborious, confusing, and depressing process that is the family court. I would love to learn how to settle down and find solutions to these panicking callers and provide some sound direction and advice. Today on FIT TV, authors and coaches Doreen, Guma, and Heidi Krantz will tell us how to help our callers and others returning to helping themselves out of the curse of sustaining the negative impact of divorce and other life's catastrophes. Doreen Guma on my left, to her left Heidi Krantz, and to her left Gary Jacobs. All right, subject is coping with divorce and other life's tragedies and allowing for hope if possible. So as an author to the book that you want, would you start us and tell us what you can do for people like that?
Absolutely.
I get these calls all the time and I don't know what to do with them.
Absolutely. Well,
there's no direct path to solution.
Absolutely. Well, everybody needs hope. This is absolute. So basically, the biggest thing that is most important is when a person actually makes that phone call. That's their first step. The first step is always recognizing what it is that is troubling you. Oh my gosh, there's this much stuff in our world, right? Everything is bombarding us, whether it's news or family or, things that we are responsible to do. Our job is overwhelming, right? But when we choose something and we call somebody and we say, I need help with, that's the best step. That's the first step.
I totally agree. You're really validating the courage that it takes for them to reach out for support. And that's really the first step in moving forward. Sometimes when we go through a challenge, we retreat into ourselves, and reaching out for support is a great springboard for moving on and moving forward. We really want to validate those people's feelings when they call feeling desperate, going through a divorce, because it is so painful and so many emotions get stirred up during this time and so overwhelming. So we really want them to get that we get where they're coming from. And going forward from there, it's really about helping each person identify the opportunity within the challenge. Because if this difficulty and challenge did not come into their lives, the rest of the picture would not be ready to follow. So we want to ask, what is one goal that you could possibly accomplish now that you couldn't accomplish or that you felt held back from accomplishing in your previous relationship? What are you freed up for now?
I'm trying to visualize you saying that to me as if I were going through our standard caller who's in desperate need of keeping their family out of court and maintaining a connection with their kids. And it's a little hard for me to grasp. Because I was...
Yes, that is further down the line, certainly. The first thing you want to do is validate their feelings. Second thing you want to do is let them know it won't always feel this way. When I work with clients...
We do say that, by the way.
When I work with clients, since I've been through a difficult divorce, it builds a lot of trust and rapport when I say that. I know how you feel now. You won't always feel that way. Yes, everyone's pain and path is different, but as dark as it feels now, it will not always be that way. And that's a really important reassurance.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, we're all used to when somebody loses a loved one, a parent, everybody can understand because we've all lost most of us have lost somebody, and there's a grieving process that you go through. There's the denial, the anger, and it's sort of a progression that takes time. But when somebody goes through a divorce, you say, if you haven't gone through it before, half the people in the United States probably haven't gone through it, and they say, you know what, suck it up and move on, go out and start dating again. And what's your advice? Do you think that sometimes maybe going out and dating right away and trying to forget about it or is not the answer? From what I read about you and your website, it's sort of like you have to deal with the problems first before you can move on. Otherwise you skip that part and it'll just keep coming back to haunt you at night.
Yes, so everyone heals on their own timetable. Just the way that we heal from an injury or from surgery, everybody heals at a different pace. We don't need to compare ourselves to others' healing process, but we really do need to take that time to focus on ourselves, on our personal goals, on our personal development, on rebuilding our self-esteem, our belief in our success. But at a certain point, and here's what I believe, you can't complete the healing process on your own. there's a segment of that healing that's going to need to take place in relation to other people. So we can't wait in a hut on a mountain to heal.
Right.
We've got to get out there at some point, and sometimes when people are waiting and waiting to get out there, they get into a real protective mode,
Right.
and they can really get stuck there. And sometimes it's my role to kind of get them unstuck and realize that time alone is not what's going to heal.
You know what happens to us, Heidi? It's not us anymore. I mean, I'm done with mine for 20 years already.
Yes.
But the initial impact of whatever it might be in terms of either custody or some ripping off in some way that the legal system happens to do to us, is that we want to look for, well, if this is happening to me, it's like science, if and then, you know, the famous statements, if this is so, then that would be so, it's logic. So for us, we say, oh, well, if that happened to me, then I could do this. But in the court system, there really is no logic to a path that will get you out of where you are, because they're just ripping your lungs out from you, and you just have to survive.
Yes.
And you think about surviving moment to moment, and you lose focus. Am I right?
Right.
There's certainly.
Yes, and when you say that, it brings to mind a very effective strategy, and that is move forward in baby steps. Just get through 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time.
That is good advice, I think. I don't know if anybody can
And
grab
it
hold
can,
of that.
it
but
can
that's good
really be
advice.
helpful. The other really important point is, like Gary was mentioning, many people turn to family and friends, which is important, it's crucial.
Right.
It must be done, we need that. But each of those people is coming through their own lens, and they're from their own agenda that they may not realize.
So true for us, right?
Absolutely.
So much so. So reaching out to an objective professional, such as a coach or a therapist, depending on the situation, you're going to have somebody with no agenda, just a blank slate, and their agenda is your agenda.
What is the difference between a therapist and a life coach? Or a psychologist, a life coach, and a therapist? And part two is, how do we know which one to reach out to?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. There's definitely different training, and although there is some overlap, therapy really focuses on the healing process and focuses a lot on past pain and the question of why. And that may be an oversimplification.
Right.
Coaching focuses on now into the future and the question of how. So coaching is very action-oriented. Every session ends up with an action plan with goals that the client commits to, with the coach holding them accountable to the goals.
No,
It's also a combination of emotional and practical support, where therapy tends to be more of an emotional support.
It's a moving forward. And I've read articles through Harvard Medical School where it's been proven with positive psychology that working with a therapist and a coach at the same time is extremely beneficial.
Yes.
You see that the court system would say, wait a minute, you really need help right now because you don't have a plan of action. It's not going to happen.
Right.
You have a plan of an action going forward. The legal system works on the history of something that happened.
And rehashing the history,
And
and fighting over the history.
it, trying to develop it, trying to
Yes.
expand it,
Right.
but it never goes forward. And I think of the suffering that people have gone through who we meet all the time, can't picture themselves going forward when they're so busy moment to moment dealing with the
They're
initial
trying to
poor
survive,
contact that they had
right.
in the court.
And we're also not thinking clearly after going through the system that just destroys your self-esteem, as you said, and what you think was reality really isn't, thinking that the courts are looking for the best interest of everybody, and then you come to find out that they're not. And I think to me it would have been refreshing to have somebody that I trust to say, you know what, here's, working with you though, but here's what I think you should do, and next week I'm going to come in and we're going to see if you did this step. Where a therapist, they sort of let you talk and come up with it, but sometimes you just want to be told, this is what I think you need to do, by somebody who's realistic, as Chris said, not a family member,
Not a lawyer.
certainly not a lawyer, but somebody's just looking out for your best interest and would say, Chris, next week when you come in, I want you to take this step. And it's just sometimes refreshing to just take that off and let somebody else, I guess, make that decision for you.
But not in any way to minimize the importance of therapy.
No, I
and
understand that.
particularly
Not
when
at all.
someone
You have
is,
value here.
severely depressed or severely anxious.
Well, this is more situational depression.
Yes.
I think that you're talking about is that somebody who's just in this situation and who wouldn't be
Overwhelming.
depressed going
Right.
through
Of
a
course,
horrible
of
divorce.
course.
It wouldn't be normal if you didn't have some level of depression, but it's a situational thing that you need to just work
Yes.
through.
Absolutely. And as Doreen says, many of my clients do work in therapy and coaching
Right.
simultaneously, or sometimes in succession, first therapy, then coaching.
Now, just this is obviously there's a cost involved in this, and insurance probably doesn't cover this. I'm
That's
assuming.
correct.
So, what just a range of what is something like this cost? Is it exorbitant? You're talking several $100s an hour. What does something like this cost, just approximately?
Coaching
Give an idea.
is an affordable service. The way I usually work with clients is on a coaching program. So it's a retainer for the coming month, and that retainer includes 4 45-minute sessions and emails and calls as needed for support, for questions, to let me know that goals are accomplished. And
So they don't have to be afraid to pick up the phone that they're going to get charged their
Ex-
$450 an hour.
Exactly.
Because we're all shy with that going
When
through.
when it comes to us,
Exactly.
we should recommend coaching instead of forensic psychologists.
Right.
Very often, we need something like that. We need
It's
more on hand.
dependent, right, on what is.
Let's
the-
go forward. Here's where you are. Let's figure out a way to go forward.
Right.
So somebody could pick up the phone, and if they're going through a bad situation, pick up the phone and call you and say, "Hey, Heidi, what do I do in this situation?" And you could talk them through it.
I absolutely encourage communication between sessions with my
Okay.
clients.
So that's different than a therapist who wouldn't just pick up the phone and take your call unless you were in a really grave situation.
And coaching actually helps that person work their stuff through. So we had discussed like the forever counseling concept. You go to the psychologist and you rehash and you rehash and you're depressed and you're frustrated and you leave, and I don't know that it's any better.
Oops, I don't like the idea
So-
that a psychologist would say your time is up.
Well, you know
Well,
what? We're
it's a
we're
reality.
here-
Especially if you're in the middle of something.
Well, we're here to help people realize that they're so powerful and that they're so amazing, and
You
they
can
might
do that
be,
a lot faster that way.
right. And we're working through this situation, but it is like Heidi said, it's not going to be that way forever. We've experienced, all of us here have experienced this in our lifetime. It is not an easy situation, and one of the biggest things is people have to realize, I know that it feels that they are alone and it's the only person that they're having this situation, but they're not. And that's one of the things through the Time to Play Foundation. We are working on having breakup to breakthrough support groups at the club Time to Play that we have under the not-for-profit to be able to help. And that's a much more affordable situation because that's a group thing. But in that group thing, there's also power because we can also, the people can get to be friends and they can move forward together as well.
I see the breakup and breakthrough session valuable,
Extremely.
except for one thing: when you're losing your kids. It involves more than just your immediate emotional reparation. It also involves your future, and you can't control it. It's not so easy to control.
In a group setting, there are often others going through that same situation. So you can get support not only from the facilitator of the group, but from each other. Because who better to understand such a
some
painful,
others, sure, yeah.
difficult experience than others going through it. Other group settings that I work with, I give many workshops and seminars. So if somebody is not ready for an ongoing group, I offer many workshops and seminars. I'm actually have a class coming up this week. It's called Dating Essentials, and it's kind of for people starting over and looking for how do I do this all over again, maybe after 20 and 30 and 40 years of marriage.
Sure.
I think that's interesting because we have a lot of, Chris and I meet a lot of people who they're at the end of their divorce, or I like to say at the end because unfortunately it never really ends. So going through this, and I think a lot of people say, I'm having a hard time dating, and they break up with a lot of people, and then you start to talk to them, and what you realize is that when they're dating, they can't help but to talk about their divorce. Talk about going through court, and you don't want to say don't do it because that is their life. How do you coach one to? I guess I said, do you coach somebody not to talk about their divorce? Because I would think that's a turnoff to somebody to listen about how horrible the court system is. And we also have a lot of anger.
Yes.
How do you not let that come and destroy your next relationship.
Absolutely. You know, one of my first pointers is keep it positive and keep it light in your first initial conversations. So important. And, you know, many first dates do go downhill because of what you're saying. And sometimes people need to learn from experience. So the class that I'm going to be giving is at Great Neck Adult Education. I also give a monthly dating success workshop for a group called 7 in Heaven Singles. And we talk about a lot of these pointers. Specifically, one of the pointers that I talk about is approaching love with a plan. Because we approach every aspect of our lives with a plan that's very well thought out, but somehow our love lives, we just get pulled along by the current. And we want to really make those choices in a more empowered way.
But I find a lot of times we get attracted, somehow end up
I was just
with a
thinking the same
person
thing.
going through the same thing. Now you have two damaged people
Right.
who both, all they want to do is talk about how horrible their ex is and how bad the court is,
Right.
and they are.
There's a kinship and attraction.
There is, so I think, but then those relationships end up becoming volatile, and you have two angry people who just feed off each other. How do we not get it stuck into that? Or is it okay that we do, and maybe that's a good thing because you have something in common?
Well, we have a podcast that we do on the Time to Play Foundation every week, and it's called Empower Half Hour. And we actually did this morning have Gail Adams, who is 7 in Heaven. She's a matchmaker, and she does singles events on Long Island, and it's fantastic. She has 20 events a month, and she's helping people meet each other. The thing we emphasized is leave the dirty laundry at home. This is an opportunity for new. This is exciting. And you know what? Look, again, all four of us have been there, and it's not a good experience. But you have endless possibilities now, right? You have endless possibilities. You are meeting a person who could be the best, oh my gosh, right? The best thing.
I guess a lot of
So
it depends on your attitude.
you
If
can-
you're positive
absolutely.
attitude, you can ride that storm a lot. You can go through
Right,
that a
but
lot.
you're going to have to make that happen. Put your best face forward, because this could be the gift. You're
Right.
meeting this person, and it's a clean
and you
slate.
don't know where it's going to be. It could be the next person.
You don't know. And here's the thing: that dirty laundry discussion will come out, right?
Sooner or later.
But you want to get that person and meet that person and enjoy that person.
Yes.
Like even when Gary and I met each other in a class we took together, you know, it took a few days before Gary told me, but we had pleasant conversation, and you know, we enjoyed each other's company. And then you could go into stuff and trust that person, but you want to learn about that person.
I think that's so true. All the dirty laundry stuff comes later on, so that's not your bonding.
And
That's
that's not
later
who
on
you
when you're
are,
ready to
right.
reveal it to each other. You know, what brings you together is really a well thought out plan of the traits that are important to you in the partner that
It's
you're
funny.
seeking.
It's like starting over. I mean, I'm single again too, but it's like
Yes.
starting over when you have a new relationship, whatever phase you might be in. You may find yourself in it for what seems like the first time.
Well, especially with the online dating now. I mean, you know, when we were younger and met our first wives and you met your husbands, there's no such thing as online dating. That's a whole new world now. You know, the
Exactly.
speed dating and things like that. You know, what is the right way to meet somebody? The old way was you got to talk to the person and, you know, see if you hit it off. But now, not that worked, because 50% of people get divorced. So maybe the online is the answer, but
So-
you need to learn how to pick the right person. Otherwise, it's superficial and maybe reading, well, this person went through a bad divorce too. You know, maybe I should go out with them. We have something in common. I think what you're saying is maybe that's not the right thing to do.
Well, online dating, it's really a whole skill to learn. And this is what happens to people who are re-navigating. They're not familiar with it. And there are really very specific success strategies. I actually am divorced and remarried and met my husband internet dating.
Okay.
So
you have personal experience.
Yes, and I coach people every day on how to construct their profile and how to navigate the system
That's important, though. That's-
successfully.
How to construct your profile is, I think that's something you don't think about, but when you put it up,
It's really important. And when a person is coming out of a long relationship, how would they know how to do it?
right? And like Doreen said, you know, if you're going through a 5 or a 7-year, 10-year divorce, that sort of becomes who you are. And as Doreen said, that's not who we are. That's who you
Exactly.
become
It's such a good point.
temporarily.
And you don't even recognize it.
You don't exactly. I think that's a great.
Yeah.
So setting your profile almost is therapy for
Yeah.
you, saying, "Wait a minute, this is who I am."
Right. And this is something cool, because now you might not have been able to go water skiing because your ex-husband or ex-wife hated water skiing.
Right.
But oh my
Now you
gosh,
can go,
now
sure.
you could go, and maybe you could find that
Yes.
best
Sounds like a
person
baby step to
ever.
me, but it's a good
Yes.
But it's a good idea,
Yeah.
and
It
and
goes,
it's
I
yes,
get
it
it.
goes back to what was I held back from in my previous relationship? What did I feel held back from that I can now do? And the list is endless.
Instead of thinking how depressed you might be about something, you could say, boy, thank God now I'm available for
It's
somebody who really
perspective.
appreciates me.
Right, it's perspective, and you
Yes.
should be
Right?
appreciated because
Yeah.
life is short.
So Heidi, I'm going
And
to try to give the
yeah.
viewers some free advice since they're not paying for this. When do you let somebody meet your kids?
So that's a great question.
Because everyone that says us, I know I've met people who the second time they go out, they're head over heels and they want to share that excitement with their
Right.
children. They bring their kids the first time, and maybe the kids aren't ready, and it falls apart. And how
So,
many,
absolutely. So if you're asking me, I'm going to say you really want to be careful not to give your kids a revolving door experience.
Yes.
Whether they're young children, teenagers, or even adult children. So you want to wait until you're really in a serious, committed relationship, and then it's time to bring the person into your life with your children slowly.
Right.
Again, in baby steps.
I mean, that's one of the
Not,
answers that Chris and I think we're looking
I
for.
wrote it down. I was so hot on that.
Because
Very
we are,
good.
even having them, sometimes you see people they're dating, and all of a sudden they're sleeping over at the other person's house with their children in the other room,
we really
and,
want to be
and
sensitive.
we're against that.
We really want to be sensitive
right
to our
away.
children. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and this varying ages. The time that you spend with somebody when you first meet them, I say best case scenario when you first meet somebody is not to think that you can just do whatever you want to and say, have courtesy, step back, move slower. And these are things that people advised us years ago, and we never paid any attention to it because we were young and beautiful.
You're still young and beautiful.
I totally
My point is
agree.
it's a
Slow
lot
but
different.
steady.
Yeah,
Slow but steady.
Yeah, it's much better to go and get a real relationship going rather than
Yes.
just a physical appearance or sex or
Right.
whatever might be first on your mind.
Right, and you have to trust yourself. And I think that we have to stop being babies too, and really have a good communication, because your marriage failed for whatever reason, like my family had this experience. Do you keep it inside and let the other person think, not know what you're thinking, because you don't, right?
Yeah.
So maybe if you do have questions, instead of being like, oh, he didn't text me today, because I hear
I'm
this
hearing
all the
that now.
time, right?
The
Yes.
damn
Right?
phones are such an
Right?
issue.
But how often do you text after the first date? You
So-
don't text, you text,
There's
you
text
wait.
rules now.
Right,
There's text
Right,
rules.
Exactly.
but at what point do we feel comfortable doing whatever it is?
I got a good one
and
for
is
you
it
in the
stressing
same
us out?
in the same vein. Men and women. Do you find a difference between men and women in the dating game in terms of what you can do, what's advisable and not advisable? Like men tend to move a little quicker in their minds about being more proactive or aggressive. Tend to. I know it's changing and things. There are women who can do that, but
So I have, about 50-50 male and female clients, and I find that there's a real similarity, and that is, it's a fear of rejection, and that's who we are as people. We feel rejection. We fear being hurt, and so everybody navigates that fear in a different way, but it's a human thing. It's not a male or female thing. Certainly there are lots of differences I could go into, but that's the real common thread that I find.
okay.
And that's for a lot of things. It's for your job. It's for all the stuff. We keep things bottled up, and that makes us feel bad. So as I'm getting older and as I'm continuing to learn in my life, I kind of say stuff now. I
Right.
take that shot to say it, because if I don't say it, what happens?
You regret it.
We sit there and we ponder, right? We have the pondering.
And Heidi, I think one of the things I read in your website was it talks about happiness after divorce, and I think that's important that people realize that this can be a step. Maybe you chose the wrong spouse, and for whatever reason you got divorced, and this is a second chance to do it right and become happy after divorce. And you both have support groups that you do. Do you think that's important to get into a support group, or is it not for everybody? And how does one achieve happiness after? I know that's a simple question for a short program, but how does one achieve happiness after a divorce?
So, many of my blog articles, since we're so pressed for time, are on the Time to Play website, as well as on my own website, Reinvention Life Coaching. My book chapter in this beautiful book that Doreen has authored and compiled is called Breakup to Breakthrough and talks a lot about happiness post-divorce. The first thing is to believe that it's possible. And
We're going to have to cut it.
Yes.
We ran a little bit long. Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Heidi. And thank
Very
you, Gary.
welcome.
Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.
Properly inflating my tires burns less fuel and saves me money on gas. Yeah, I'm saving Mother Nature from pollution, but more importantly, she saved me $11. Ow!
Environmental defense. Get green.
By keeping my car regularly tuned, I save money on gas and repairs. That also means cleaner air. You know, feels good to help save the cash, planet.
Environmental defense. Get green. For more tips, go to getgreen.com.
Introducing the all-new Enclave. It's a minivan to the max, with features like remote control sliding rear doors, 150 cable channels, a full sky view roof, temperature-controlled cup holders, and the 6-point navigation system. It's the minivan for families on the go.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
What kind of man are you? I'm a father. Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schmasthma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
I swear.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy. Hi, Dad.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.